So we were talking about white privilege and the left's view that, that America is inherently racist. All of you are racist, as you saw, and we know because people tell you that you're racist, right? They don't know you, they don't know anything about you. One of the gals over here, I turned off the mic so you couldn't hear the conversation. I said to her, she's the one who was shouting that you're all white supremacists. I said, you don't know me, you don't know anything about me. How do you know I'm a white supremacist? And she said, well, that's the image you give off. And I said, really? Was it the yarmulke that did it for you? Now, before we talk about, the left's argument is basically that inequality between groups is inequity. If there's any sort of inequality between racial groups, that's because something has happened in the United States that is deeply unfair and is currently happening. Not just has happened in the past, but it's happening right now. We are all the beneficiaries of white privilege. We are all the purveyors and propagators, words they don't understand, of white privilege, right? Now, it is true, before we go any further, that black people in the United States have obviously suffered historic discrimination. Right? It's inarguably true. Of course that's true. It's even true that some people are likely suffering from the effects of historic discrimination under things like Jim Crow, but that does not mean that black people right now are suffering from institutional discrimination. And historic discrimination does not explain current levels of inequality. It certainly doesn't justify discrimination against white people who had nothing whatsoever to do with Jim Crow. Individuals all over America experience inequality. Some of us are born rich, some of us are born poor, some of us are born smart, some of us are born protesters. Right? Nobody is capable of righting wrongs done to people 3 generations ago by penalizing their great-grandchildren. You can't do that. The solution to historic injustice is not modern injustice. 3 generations ago, my people were being slaughtered by the millions in Europe, and FDR wouldn't let Jews into the country. That doesn't mean there's widespread anti-Jewish privilege throughout America that requires restitution from all of you. That's not how this works. We cannot fix where you started in life. We can't. That's beyond your control. That's beyond my control. But the notion of white privilege suggests you can never, under any circumstances, overcome where you started in life. Because there's this big bear called white privilege that's trying to eat you. That if you make it even if you make all the right decisions, white privilege will stand in your way. That is a lie, but it is a lie that this campus obviously promotes. In 2013, the History Department created mandatory diversity training, giving out handouts on the re-education process, which sounds kind of Orwellian, needed for white people to overcome racist conditioning. This university has sponsored a multitude of events on white privilege and supported the lying Black Lives Matter movement. New freshmen are supposed to take diversity training where they learn, of course, about white privilege. As Katrina Morrison, a junior from Milwaukee, said last year, quote, "We wanted to talk about privilege. What is white privilege? What are the sets of privileges that we all have? It's okay that we have these different sets of privileges and identities and can still coexist." The new Our Wisconsin training program, which was initiated for the freshmen this year, it's going to cost about $200,000. And it includes students taking part in discussion groups, writing about their experiences, and practicing other mental exercises to help them realize their feelings toward other ethnicities. As you can see, this has been a wild success. In general, it turns out there's another reason that in a free country some people fail and some people succeed. Some values, some behavior is better than other values and behavior. And people who tend to hold fast to better values do better than people who don't. Perhaps equality of opportunity only exists so long as people are willing to take advantage of those opportunities. And that's the truth. White privilege isn't reality. It's just a cowardly way to blame somebody else for your own failures to live up to decent standards. Whites are not born with a genetic predisposition to doing the right thing in some arbitrary moral system that benefits whites for doing the right thing. There are 3 simple life rules that will guarantee that you are not permanently poor in the United States, regardless of race, regardless of gender. Finish high school, get a job, get married before you have babies. That's it. And I guarantee you that everybody in this room and all the people outside are capable of this. Right? You've already finished high school. Everybody, even the poli-sci majors, will eventually get a job. And you're all capable of not having babies before you get married. Just don't put that there right now without that thing on it. Come on. There is no such thing as generalized white privilege or institutional racism. There is just decision privilege. For example, it turns out that the greatest privilege in American society is being born with 2 parents in the home. And that is true for every single race. It is true regardless of race. The poverty rate among 2-parent black families in the United States is 7%. The poverty rate among white single-parent families is 22%. What happened to the white privilege? Why isn't the white single mother richer than the black two-parent family? Well, because single mothers are not richer than two-parent families. End of story. The single greatest predictor of intergenerational poverty in America is single motherhood. White privilege is not responsible for elevated levels of black men getting black women pregnant and leaving. Okay, it is not. And white privilege, by the way, is also not responsible for an increasing number of white men getting white women pregnant and then leaving. There's no white person holding a gun to some dude's head telling him, screw your girlfriend and take off. It's not happening, okay? How about, here's another privilege. Okay, people are always whining about the white privilege in the criminal justice system. Here's another privilege that I think is more important. It's what I like to call the not committing crimes privilege. Okay, the higher criminality rate in the black community is not the result of some evil white system of skin privilege. It's because individuals are committing crimes. If you don't want to go to jail for murder, I have an easy solution. Don't murder people. Here is the fact about that supposedly evil criminal justice system. It actually under-prosecutes murder in minority communities. You know why? Because minority communities are under-policed. When police do come into contact with black people to take the lying, disgusting Black Lives Matter movement's cause, police are less likely to kill black people than white people in the same circumstances. As early as 1994, the DOJ surveyed felony cases in the country's 75 largest urban areas. You know what they found? Lower felony prosecutions for blacks than whites. A deadly force lab study from Washington State University last year found that participants were biased in favor of black suspects in simulated threat scenarios. In 2015, the DOJ investigated the Philly Police Department for racism. You know what they found? They found white police officers were less likely than black or Hispanic police officers to shoot black suspects. Just a few months ago, front page of the New York Times, study from Harvard University, Professor Roland Fryer, he surveyed 1,000 police shootings. He found black suspects are shot less often than white suspects in comparable situation. By the way, Fryer is black. In 2015, the cops shot, here's the total statistic, you ready? In 2015, the cops shot 987 people who died. A huge majority of those were armed or threatening deadly force. Blacks represented 26% of those shot. Blacks also represent in the United States nearly 50% of all murder perpetrators. Police officers are 18.5 times more likely to be shot by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be killed by the cops. How about the white privilege of stop and frisk? We hear this one all the time, right? The white stop and frisk is super duper racist. Mayor de Blasio, that idiot communist from New York, he thinks that. In New York, the reason why stop and frisk keeps running into minorities is because minorities keep committing crimes. Between January and June 2008, 98% of all gun assailants in the city of New York were black or Hispanic. Stop and frisk targeted 85% black and Hispanic. So statistically, they were discriminating against white people, actually. Right? If there is white privilege, it's in over-policing white communities and under-policing minority communities. Black areas plagued by violent crime don't need fewer cops, they need more cops. And they won't get them, thanks to people like those Black Lives Matter protesters. And more black people will die because of that. How about pulling people over for speeding? Right? They keep saying you're driving while black. This is the idea. Only one problem. So, for example, the DOJ thought that the New Jersey State Police, the troopies in New Jersey, they thought that they were pulling over black people at elevated rates. So they did a study. This is back in '94 under Bill Clinton's DOJ. And what they found was that black people sped disproportionately. Blacks were 25% of all speeders and 23% of drivers stopped for speeding. How about sentencing disparities? You hear this one too, right? I'm just going through and debunking all of your sociology classes now, okay? How about sentencing disparities? They're always talking about the difference between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. You know why there's a difference in sentencing between crack cocaine and powder cocaine? The reason is because black legislators from the inner city were sick of watching crack ravage their communities. They wanted more penalties and higher penalties to get the drug dealers out of their communities because crack is more addictive and easier to distribute than powder cocaine. If you actually want a comparable substance, take the sentence for crystal meth. Crystal meth has exactly the same sentence for a possession of 1 ounce, and virtually all the people who are arrested for possession of crystal meth are white. But all of this is white privilege, right? It's all white, everything is white privilege. When Baltimore riots, when a majority black city riots after a majority black police force is involved in the death of a black man, and the city has a majority black city council and an entirely Democratic city council, and there's a black district attorney, and a black mayor, and a black attorney general, and a black president of the United States, the riots are because of white privilege.